Welcome to a new Bitcoin Books video. Today, we're diving into a book that really re-examines economics right from the ground up. It's Principles of Economics by Saifedean Ammous. And trust me, this is not your average textbook. It's a whole different way of thinking about how the world actually works. The author, Saifedean Ammous, kicks things off with this really personal quote. He basically wrote the book that he wishes he'd had as a teenager. And the whole goal here is to just cut through all the jargon and confusion you get in mainstream economics and give you a super clear first principles understanding. It's for anyone who really wants to get the economic way of thinking. So the book starts with this absolutely crucial distinction. It argues that there are two fundamentally different ways to look at an economy. And, the lens you choose to look through can lead you to completely opposite conclusions. Okay, so on one side, you've got what's called the quantitative approach. This is what you see in a lot of textbooks. It basically treats the economy like a big machine. It measures things like GDP and unemployment and looks for statistical patterns. But then on the other side, you have the human action approach. This comes from the Austrian School of Economics, and its core idea is actually really simple. Only individuals act. The economy isn't some machine. It's just what happens when billions of real people make purposeful choices. Now, to make this a little less abstract, the book uses an example we've all heard about, the minimum wage. How would each of these two approaches analyze its effects? And wow, this just perfectly illustrates the difference. The quantitative lens might see a $10 billion bump in wages, plug that into a model and predict, hey, more spending, more jobs. But the human action lens looks at the actual choices people have to make. And it concludes that a minimum wage makes it illegal for an employer to hire someone whose productivity is below that wage. So the key takeaway here is that the policy doesn't just raise wages, it literally prices the least experienced and lowest skilled people right out of the job market. So this human action way of thinking, it doesn't just give us a different perspective. It actually helps solve some of these age-old economic puzzles. And one of the most famous is the paradox of value. Seriously, think about it for a second. Water is absolutely essential for survival, yet it costs next to nothing. Diamonds, on the other hand, serve no real essential purpose, but they're incredibly expensive. It seems totally backward, right? Well, for centuries, economists really struggled to explain this. The attempts to solve it led to these two competing theories. First, you have the labor theory of value, which argued that value comes from the labor you put into something. The book uses this amazing analogy to show the problem with that. If you spend hours making a cake out of mud, the labor theory says it's just as valuable as a real cake, which is, of course, completely absurd. Then you have the subjective theory of value, which is central to the Austrian School. It argues that value isn't objective at all. It's all in our heads. It depends on our personal needs and wants. That mud cake is worthless simply because nobody wants it. And the key that unlocks this entire paradox is a concept called marginal utility. See, we never choose between all the water in the world and all the diamonds in the world. We only choose at the margin. Because water is everywhere, the next glass of water has very little value to us. But because diamonds are so scarce, the next diamond is incredibly valuable. It's not about the total, it's about the value of just one more unit. Okay, so this whole idea of scarcity is at the heart of all economics. But the book makes a really fascinating point that we often focus on the wrong kind of scarcity. The ultimate scarce resource isn't something we pull out of the ground. And this is such a profound point. As our technology gets better, we get more and more efficient at finding things like oil or copper. In fact, if you measure them by how much labor it takes to get them, pretty much all commodities have gotten cheaper over time. But the one resource that is absolutely 100% finite for every single one of us is our time. And because our time is scarce, we are all constantly forced to make this trade-off between today and tomorrow. This is called time preference. Someone with a high time preference wants that gratification right now, but someone with a low time preference, they're willing to delay that consumption to save and invest for an even bigger reward down the road. Now, according to the book, this single concept, time preference, is the engine of all human progress. It all starts with the choice to lower your time preference, which just means deciding to save. Those savings then become the capital, the tools, the machines, the factories that make all of our labor so much more productive. And that increased productivity is what raises our standard of living. It's a beautiful, virtuous cycle. And this quote from Hans Hermann Hoppe, which is featured in the book, just sums up the idea perfectly. Lowering our time preference isn't just, a smart personal finance move. It is the very act that builds civilization. It's the choice to provide for the future. Okay, so we have billions of people all making choices based on their own personal time preference. But how in the world do all those individual actions coordinate to create the incredibly complex global economy we see? Well, the answer isn't a central planner sitting in a control room.
The book explains that prices are the secret sauce. A price isn't just some random number. It's this incredibly dense signal packed with information about supply, demand, scarcity, and what people actually want.
So think about it this way. A rising price for coffee beans sends a signal to farmers in Colombia that people in Japan want more coffee. It tells entrepreneurs where to invest in new shipping routes. It allows a cafe owner in Paris to calculate whether she can afford to hire another barista. The price system coordinates this unbelievably intricate global dance of cooperation, and it does it peacefully and voluntarily, without anyone having to be in charge. All right, so now let's bring all these big ideas together. We've talked about human action, subjective value, time preference, and the price system. The book weaves all of this into a really grand conclusion about the nature of civilization itself. The argument is that civilization isn't a given, it's an economic achievement. It's built on a foundation of respecting private property, which allows us to cooperate peacefully. That enables people to lower their time preference, to save, and to build up capital. And the whole thing is coordinated by the peaceful, voluntary trade that happens through market prices. But what happens when you start messing with that foundation? The book makes a really powerful critique of modern fiat money. That's the government money that isn't backed by anything physical. When that money is constantly losing its value to inflation, it punishes savers. It discourages the exact behavior that builds civilization in the first place. And it gets worse. It completely corrupts the price system. Unsound money sends out false signals all over the economy. Entrepreneurs make bad calculations, they invest in projects that aren't actually sustainable, and this leads to booms and busts and just a massive waste of capital, time, and labor. It's like trying to build a skyscraper with a faulty measuring tape. And all of this leads to the final, really powerful question that the book leaves us with. If civilization is built by lowering time preference and having sound economic calculation, what happens when you throw that whole engine into reverse? It's a really thought-provoking way to end, and it definitely makes you want to dig deeper. For those who want to learn more, the link to get the book is available in the video description. If you found this content interesting, please subscribe to the channel and like it to help us reach as many people as possible. Thank you.